Welcome. Our daily thoughts this week are focusing on the word that is repeated 13 times in Hebrews, the word better, that emphasises the superiority of the Lord Jesus Christ and his work over against the former Jewish practices of those who would be receiving this letter. And yesterday we thought of Jesus as the better priest, the better high priest, and we thought of how under the Jewish system there were so many priests because they were mortal, and as they died others had to come and replace them. Not only that, but they were sinful, and so they had to offer sacrifices for their own sins as well as for the people. But Christ, by contrast, he lives forever. He has a permanent priesthood. He never has to be replaced. Not only that, but he is holy and pure and separate from sinners, and so he is a better priest. He is the supreme priest. He is the only priest, the only mediator between man and God that we need. But today I want us to think about one of the tasks that the priest performed, and that was to offer animal sacrifices to God for the sin of the people. And as ever, Hebrews wants to tell us that Christ is a better sacrifice. Listen to the words of chapter 10, verses 11 to 14. Every priest stands daily at his service, offering repeatedly the same sacrifices which can never take away sins. But when Christ had offered for all time a single sacrifice for sins, he sat down at the right hand of God, waiting for that time until his enemies should be made a footstool for his feet. For by a single offering he has perfected for all time those who are being sanctified. Now there are three contrasts I want you to notice from those verses. Number one, the frequency of the sacrifices. And on the one hand, we're told of the repeated nature of the sacrifice of animals. The priest, we're told, is forever busy offering repeatedly the same sacrifices. Day by day, he would be there doing the same thing over and over again. But by contrast, Christ offered for all time a single sacrifice. How amazing is that? A single sacrifice. One sacrifice with permanent effect. What kind of a sacrifice could hold such power? And the answer is, of course, that the sacrifice that Jesus offered was himself. Himself. Chapter 9, verse 26. He has appeared once and for all at the end of the ages to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. Chapter 10, verse 10. We have been sanctified through the offering of the body of Jesus Christ once and for all. And that is the meaning of the cross. As Jesus died on that cross, he is offering himself to die in the place of the sinner. He takes on himself the righteous wrath and judgment of God towards sin that we so rightly deserve. He offers himself in our place. That is the ultimate sacrifice, the single sacrifice that is so much better. Secondly, the effectiveness of the sacrifice. Verse 11 tells us that the animal sacrifices were ineffective. It says that they can never take away sins. And certainly a violent death involving the shedding of blood through those animal sacrifices pointed to the seriousness of sin, and that death was the judgment upon sin. But they could never deal with sin. The death of any amount of animals could never pay the price of human sin. But again, Christ, it says, by a single offering, he has perfected for all time those who are being sanctified. Totally effective. God fully accepts the sacrifice of his Son so that the sinner who is united to Christ by faith is perfected, is covered by the perfection of Christ himself. But then thirdly, notice the position of the priest who is offering the sacrifices. Verse 11 says that every priest stands daily at his service. Why does he stand? Because his work is never done. But what about Christ? Verse 12 says that when Christ had offered his once for all sacrifice, he sat down at the right hand of God. And he could sit down because the work he had come to do was successfully accomplished. From the shame of the cross, Christ now sits in the glory of heaven. Christ, a better sacrifice, a complete sacrifice, a sufficient sacrifice. This is where the sinner has to look to have his or her sins forgiven and dealt with. May the Lord bless that thought to you today, and may it lead you to the cross to find the better sacrifice. Amen.